Welcome to Escape the Noise, a podcast about hiking, mental health, and everything in between. I'm Joe Vogel, your host. We're coming to you from the Silicon Slopes studio in downtown Provo, Utah. Our guest this week, Mike Rife, a wellness influencer with over 50,000 followers on Instagram. Mike grew up in Utah before moving to South Korea for a few years as a child. He later returned to Korea as an LDS missionary. Shortly after returning, his mother passed away from ALS. Listen as he talks about how the mountains, hiking, and fitness have acted as a form of therapy and how he's trying to use those insights to help others through their own challenges.
Kind of a red personality, and if I look back at my life, I've always tried to control everything. Like, I want to control every minute of every day. I want to make sure everything goes perfectly, and I still want that. You know, anything that I do have direct control over, I do take seriously, and I try to do well with. But I think just realizing that in the big picture, I don't have that much control over everything going on in my life. And it's better for me to spend my energy focusing on what I can control, my actions and my reactions, and let the chips fall. And yeah. It's hard, but I think also like it's necessary. You know, whatever's going to happen it's going to happen to a certain extent.
Some serious stoicism there.
A little bit, yeah.
So speaking of, in one of we asked you some questions before the podcast, and one of the questions we asked you is, what do you love about hiking, right? Mm-hmm. I thought the way you phrased this was really interesting. You said hiking is moving meditation in nature. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think everyone pictures meditation as like kumbaya. You know, you're on a little pad on the ground, like breathing and trying not to think about anything. But I actually think, well, one piece of it is just the act of breathing heavily. I'm not a scientist, but the changes in the human body when you're breathing heavily are tremendous. Just the release of endorphins and all your feel-good chemicals. So that's part of it. Just breathing heavily, being surrounded by nature, and then moving. I believe that it just allows you to work through your thoughts. And that's what meditation is to me, is kind of working through your thoughts and seeing like, how do I feel? Is there anything in my life that's like kind of like bugging me where I know I should be doing this, but I'm not doing it for some reason? Or maybe I haven't processed this emotion about this thing. And so just the act of going into the mountains, being away from everything in my life for a little bit, being surrounded by a beautiful place, and then using my body to go from point A to point B, that movement and just the whole experience is so healthy. I think it's even more healthy on a mental level than what it does to you physically.
I agree.
Just to give you that space to work through things. And the other thing I always say is it kind of like rattles the bolts loose in your brain.
Yeah.
And you just like figure out if there's anything that's not right in there. You know, you're like, I'm still mad about this person, about this thing. Why?
Yeah.
I need to send them a message and say like, hey, you know, we're good.
Yeah.
Even little things like that. So
yeah, the movement part really resonated for me. And I've thought about that a lot. You know, I get restless a lot, you know, and so like traditional meditation's always been tricky for me. You know, I feel like I can't really focus as much as I'd like, but the movement actually helps me to focus, right? Because my body's doing something. So I thought that was a kind of really interesting component that I've noticed when I get out there and I'm just like, get the blood pumping, get the oxygen coming in, right? Like you said, your beauty is all around you. You don't have as many distractions, right? But I don't know. Just I think you hit on something really important there. That's the movement part.
Yeah, and I would attribute a lot of the things I've been able to kind of figure out over the last few years in my life to that. And if I'm not hiking, it's usually once or twice a week that I can go hike, it's the best. I would go every day if I could. But if it's not, then I go for a walk every single night. Just, get my work done for the day. I'm with the kids, get everything in a good place. And then I go for a walk. It could be 10 minutes. It could be an hour, but it's like a non-negotiable for me. And it doesn't matter if I'm out of town. Yeah. Like I could be at a conference in Vegas and I'll take a lap around the casino just so I can get that time to move around and just like, okay, how am I doing today? And just kind of assess what's going on. And I think it's a key piece of just mental well-being and feeling good.
So talk to me about different types of hikes, right? Like you talked about when you were young, you'd go with your friends, right? Mm-hmm. Seems like now you do a lot of solo hiking, right? So talk about those different types of experiences.
I think if I could, I would hike with other people probably every time. Because there's this weird thing when you hike with other people, which is there's no time pressure, really. Because if you've carved out the time for a hike, then like you've probably carved out several hours or maybe even the day. And so there's no like in most day-to-day interactions, especially as an adult, it's like we have 30 minutes.
Right.
So you're not gonna open the lid on a really juicy topic because you're gonna get stopped at 30 minutes. Where if you go hiking, now everyone's doing that moving meditation, everyone's feeling good, and then it's like, we're going to be up here for 6 hours. What do you want to talk about? And we can go deep and you can go down rabbit holes and tell stories.
Yeah.
So I think I would always choose to go with other people. The reason I go alone now is just because it's so hard to plan around schedules. And usually I like to go on Friday because it's not as busy.
Yeah.
And I have a work arrangement where they're good with me going for a Friday hike. So it's just kind of a byproduct of busy adult life that I go alone. But also, the alone hikes are pretty special too.
Yeah, I agree.
Because rather than talking to someone else for however many hours you're hiking, you kind of are talking to yourself.
Yeah.
And you can just work through those things kind of like we've talked about. And that's where a lot of my videos come from. I don't really make videos. If I'm out with my friends, then that's what we're out doing.
Yeah.
But if I'm out alone, usually that's where something comes to me and I'm like, all right, I guess I'll just pull my phone out and see what we get. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of value to both.
Totally.
And it's funny because a lot of the people that I've talked to about hiking bring up this point. This is kind of almost like a truth serum in the mountains, right? Where like you have these really deep conversations. And I think you brought up a great point, which is that part of it is just because you have time, right? And you're absolutely right. I think in our day to day, like, okay, you got an hour for lunch, you've got like 20 minutes for this Zoom call or this, and that doesn't really lend itself to those types of conversations.
No. And the nice thing I'll say about Utah, because I do get asked quite a bit, like, aren't you worried about your safety? And to a certain extent, yes, I am. Obviously, like there's people depending on me. I can't just go get lost in the mountains. But Utah, there's of all places, it's pretty safe in the mountains. Like the amount of times I've been on a mountain alone, basically nothing's happened. I've seen a porcupine. Honestly, the scariest thing was a bighorn sheep, because it's like the way it looks at you, you're like, this thing actually wants to kill me. But generally, and then most of the time my phone actually works, like on a lot of the trails around here. So, yeah, it's pretty safe.
No real, like, have you had any like crazy weather situations or?
Yeah, I have. I've been caught on Timp in a pretty nasty storm. We got up to the saddle and it was like you couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
And then it's such powerful gusts of wind that like we just turned back.
It gets pretty windy up there. And one time I went up and it was like a lot of lightning. That was a little.
The lightning, honestly, if there's one thing I'm scared of more than animals, other people, anything else, it's a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
Like I think the fastest I ever ran off a mountain was because a thunderstorm came and I was like, not today. So.
Do you do any trail running? Have you tried that?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a handful of trail marathons. I'm not fast. I'm not like elite at trail running. And honestly, everyone talks about trail running. It's like trail running, right? Most trail runners hike up and run down. From what I see,
Yeah.
It's like maybe the top 1% are running up and down. But trail running really is kind of just like hike up, run down. And I do like that. If I'm alone, I'll hike up. I don't like to run uphill. Like it's not fun. And on the way up, I'm really like soaking it in.
Yeah.
And so for me to like want to rush that process, I'm not interested. I want to really like, I have most of the experience on the way up the mountain at the top. And then usually it's like, okay, I have 2 hours. I have to be back at the car so I can go help at home.
Yeah.
And then on the way down, I'll pick it up pretty fast. But
so talk about, we kind of alluded to this earlier, but preparing for a hike, right? My sense is, and even when I'm thinking about this year, I put on some weight over the winter.
It happens.
And so I'm thinking like, I want to get in better shape so that I can enjoy my hikes, because it's not fun, when your joints are hurting and like, it's just, you're not prepared. Right. And because then all you're thinking about is just like, oh my gosh, I'm dragging myself up here. Where when you get in pretty good shape, it becomes, then you can actually look around and appreciate it all. So tell me, you alluded to this before, but how do you prepare for hiking?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one, I walk a lot. I think just walking a lot it's good for you for a ton of reasons, but it helps. Two, I do some strength training of my legs. It's nothing crazy. I have really two movements that I do once or twice a week. If you do them, you're going to hate them, but they're amazing. It's split squats and Romanian deadlifts. They're split squats. When I started, it was like I could barely do 10 with no weight, and it was like make me nauseous. But now I've like gotten to where I've got pretty solid strength there. And those two movements, I don't think you can beat them. And I don't think you need to have this elaborate strategy for how you work out. But some strength training, walking. And then as far as preparing for the hike, I mean, the best way to get proficient at hiking is to hike.
Yeah.
Right. So the lower elevation stuff is usually clear first. So I'll usually spend time just hiking the lower elevation stuff, which also kind of happens to be steeper. It's shorter, but steeper. So it's good to prep. But as far as like my actual preparation, I use this tool. It's called the Roll Recovery. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's an alternative to foam rolling because foam rolling sucks so bad. Nobody will actually foam roll. It's terrible. This thing, you just open it up and roll it up and down your legs. So I do that because people ask me like, how are your knees not hurt? And my knees don't hurt at all. And it's because I keep all the muscles right around them super loose. And
that's good rolling. To know because usually on the way down, my knees are hurting.
And actually, so my wife has done Tim 5 or 6 times. The first time she couldn't walk, like halfway down. It was so like it got to the point where she wouldn't talk to me. Like she was like, just shut up and leave me alone.
I've been there.
Okay.
I've been there.
Okay. Yeah. And then the next year, her family was doing its big group. She had FOMO. She didn't want to miss out, but she was like, my knees hurt so bad. And so I was like, take this thing and just roll out your legs for 3 or 4 days before you go. And let's see. And 0 knee pain, like nothing. So I think just keeping the muscles around the knee joint, the hip loose really helps. And then, I drink electrolytes. I eat pretty clean on the trail. I feel like a lot of people just eat straight trash, like gummy bears, and that's fine if it works for you. But I like real stuff like fruit, honey, stuff like that. I feel like it's just better fuel. And then, just the equipment helps too, right? If you're on Timp or on a big mountain anywhere and you don't have the right shoes, the number of people that I see on Timp every year with like a JanSport backpack and like Nike free shoes with no traction or cushion. And they're fine. They go up and down, but the experience can certainly be enhanced by having, electrolytes, some caffeine, maybe some ibuprofen if you need it.
Yeah.
Food that's actually got some nutrition and then the right gear.
For a hike like Timpanogos, what do you think in terms of hiking shoes? Like can you get away with just wearing like basketball shoes or like?
I'm an equipment person.
Yeah.
So yes, you can. But the experience will be so much better with the right shoe. Really anything hiking, like it could be Hoka, Ultra, whatever works for you. But the thing that I've also learned is that the same shoe doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
Like Ultras don't work for me. I do like Hokas, but there's so much cushion that they don't feel as stable to me. So if I do run down, it feels like I'm going to roll an ankle. My favorite shoe is the La Sportiva Mutant. And it's kind of like a fringe shoe. You don't see a lot of them. Maybe if you go to like a trail marathon type event, you'll see them.
Yeah.
But it is just crazy grip on the bottom, a little bit of cushion, and then super stable around the ankle. And so for me, it's perfect.
Nice. Yeah, because you can twist your ankle, right? I mean, just the nature of the trails.
Yeah.
You know, it can happen, especially if you're wearing something like this.
Yeah. Well, and that trail too, like just the different terrain you're going to see over 7.5 miles to the top.
Right.
It's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, footwear matters, and then wool socks too, because your feet are probably going to get wet. So.
Okay, so I'm gonna put you on the spot here and ask you. I already have the answer to your favorite hike, but if you can give us your top 3.
Top 3. Okay, got it. Obviously Timp, the AF side, Timpanogos. That's number 1. And if I could only hike one trail for the rest of my entire life,
that would be it.
That would be it. And I would never feel like I was missing out. I would be like that. Nope, I'm set. I got it.
Tell me a little bit. What do you love about that trail so much?
I like that it's kind of built for speed. Like the way up is, a lot of hikes just suck on the way up. It's just brutal. And that hike is nice, Timpanogos, because they call it the grand staircase, right? It kind of like works its way up. So anytime there is a climb, it flattens out for a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's nice because you can work your way up, push it a little bit, and then recover, and then work your way up to a point. Once you hit a certain point in the basin, it's just up. But and then just the trail, it goes from rocky to dirt. There's waterfalls everywhere, different types of trees, and then just that basin is my happy place. Like once I get into the Timpanogos Basin, it's like, it's as good as it gets. So yeah, that's number 1. I would say number 2, it would be Lone Peak.
Nice.
Lone Peak is different. It's brutal. I think it's the hardest hike in the state.
Interesting.
Lone Peak. That's my take. It's
have you done Kings Peak?
Done Kings Peak.
And you think it's harder than that?
I've done Kings Peak 2 or 3 times in one day.
Oh.
And I think I would do that over Lone Peak, which sounds crazy. But Lone Peak, it's just so steep. You're starting at the valley floor. It's over 6,000 feet of elevation gain. And a lot of the way, probably about half the way, there's no real trail. Yeah. You're just kind of, if you have all trails, it's easy.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you're kind of route finding. And it's more of a climb than it is a hike. But I love it because it looks like a different place. It doesn't look like
a different planet.
Yeah, it's all granite slabs and it's really gorgeous. Water will just be coming out of the ground all over. You're like, where is this water coming from? So that would be number 2. And then number 3 would be Kings Peak. And it's not so much like, I feel like Kings Peak, the actual peak itself is kind of underwhelming.
Yeah.
But just that long journey through the Uintas to get to where Kings Peak is, it's beautiful. So
those are great picks. Yeah. Lone Peak I haven't done. It's on my list.
Yeah. Got to do it. It's but yeah, plan a whole day. And I think the thing that's hard too about Lone Peak is, unless you camp, which maybe that's the move, is to hike up to like
a certain point.
Camp. And then if you don't camp, you're coming back down like 4 p.m. west facing low foothills. And I always run out of water right then. And it's so hot that like you have to keep running to not overheat so that like air is hitting your face.
Right.
So brutal adventure, but
when can you start hiking Lone Peak? Like what, Timpanogos is usually July, right? Mm-hmm. For most people. that aren't crazy.
Yeah. I'll hit Timp in May and go up the face and come down the back. But I probably
July. You go up Everest Ridge?
I've done Everest Ridge. The one I kind of like better is actually just like it's down from Everest Ridge. You just go up and you kind of end up above the glacier.
Okay.
That's above Emerald Lake. So you kind of just go straight to where that glacier is and then cut over. But it's a little bit. There's this point on Everest Ridge where I don't know. I think they call it the Notch. It's like, it's scary.
Yeah.
Like people go up it all the time, and I'm like, you one wrong step.
Yep.
It's over. So that other route has been better for me, and it actually does help if there's a little bit of snow. Then you can kind of kick in rather than like two steps forward, one step back.
Right.
Lone Peak, I would say you probably don't want to deal with much snow. So like maybe a mid-July. Really depends on each year, but yeah.
So if somebody was thinking about getting into hiking, right? Kind of a novice, I'm sure you've talked to people that are kind of getting into it, right? To be honest, I was kind of in this place 3 years ago. I'd hiked growing up, but not a ton. And then, I was, in my career and just kind of had been away from it for a long time and then kind of came back to it. And one thing I liked about it is that I did feel it was pretty accessible, right? Like if you weren't, doing crazy stuff, like it was, you could just like pick a trail that's like an hour or two and then kind of gradually work your way up. But what advice would you give somebody that's maybe wanting to get into it, but maybe just kind of getting their feet wet?
Yeah, I mean, I would just look at the easier trails on like an app like All Trails, and then I would go to an REI or Shields or wherever and just get some decent shoes. You don't need the best shoes they make. You could even buy last year's models, whatever, and a decent backpack that's not like a JanSport, right? That's not going to bounce around weird. That's made for hiking. I feel like shoes, backpack, sunglasses, a hat, you're ready to go. Some water for sure. But then I think it's good for beginners too, because if they're looking for an outlet, like something to do, one, it's really accessible. It's so cheap compared to like golf, dirt bikes, all the other things that you could do. Really expensive, and kind of maybe more inconvenient. You can just go hiking. So it's pretty cheap. And then the thing that's nice about it as a way of getting cardio is there's a clear destination. So if you're like, I'm going to run, and you just walk out your front door and you say, I'm going to run 3 miles. Well, you can start running and be like, I don't really feel like it.
Right.
And just like walk home. Like no one knows.
Yeah.
But if you go for a hike, because it's like, I'm hiking to this waterfall, there's a clear destination, and failure, it feels like failure and success is more clear. So then you're like, well, I'm only half a mile from the waterfall, so I may as well just like get there.
Yeah.
There's something waiting for you, and maybe cool pictures or whatever. So I feel like it's a good way to get into cardio. It's more fun. I think it's better for your joints than a lot of other forms of cardio, because there's not this like pounding of the pavement. Asphalt, cement is so hard.
Yeah.
And a lot of times if you're running the same speed. So it's just like the same boom, 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 boom on your joints. If you're on the trail, it's softer, one. And two, you're probably changing pace quite a bit, which is good for the different muscles, and it's good for your joints to have that kind of switch it up. So get into hiking. Into hiking. Do it.
Hey, we're all about it here. Last question. Something that kind of came up in a few of your responses is the word gratitude, right? And how kind of hiking connects to that. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably talk for an hour just about that. Because when I'm in the mountains, I'm just grateful that this beautiful place exists. And then I'm grateful, I forget which president it was that signed whatever it is, so that all these mountains, nobody owns the mountain. It's for people like us to go enjoy. But I don't know. I think it makes me grateful that I have a body that can do that can take me into the mountains. And I don't know. Life is more colorful for me when I focus on what I already have. And it's a healthy body, a family, and it's none of like the things really that I end up being super grateful for. It's just the life experience, the people that I'm with, and the journey that I'm on. whether it's like the actual physical journey of climbing a mountain or the kind of life journey, which is also kind of like climbing a mountain. So I think just focusing on, if you can't be grateful for what you have right now today, then you're not going to be grateful for what you have tomorrow. And that's something I always think about, because I feel like everyone's trying to get more. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as it's coming from a place of abundance and gratitude and not from a place of scarcity and lack. Otherwise, you can never be satisfied. So I think just realizing that, like, the best version of me is grateful every day. It has helped me to kind of live a life that feels a little bit happier. So,
love it. Well, Mike, this has been a great discussion. I was really excited to have you on. Again, we've been following you for a while and just really appreciate the energy you're putting out into the world, the great like advice and suggestions and encouragement. I think you're doing great work, and we were happy to have you here. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Happy to be here.
Thanks again to Mike for joining us. You can follow him at Rife on Instagram. Escape the Noise is produced by Timpanogos Hiking Co. I'm your host, Joe Vogel. A big thank you to Kai Bradford for his assistance with scheduling and production, to the Wildfires for our intro music, and to Silicon Slopes and Weston Tanner for hosting us and helping us make it all happen. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you again next episode.